Hi, this is a video to show the installation of Anaconda in Windows. Whether it's Windows 11 or 10 should actually be irrelevant for this video because it doesn't matter. I don't remember anything specific to Windows 10 or 11 in this install. So I'm using 11 just because I got a virtual machine set up for it. And, I might be teaching classes in Windows 11 here pretty soon. So might as well give it a shot. So the first thing you're going to need to do, not particularly shocking, is go download Anaconda. Now, I've already done that so that you don't have to wait on me. If it is a Windows install, you can just click on download here. If you're worried about checking out what installer you're getting, you can click on the icon down here for Windows, and it'll take you to the page where you can get Windows installers, Mac, and then also Python for Linux and Anaconda for Linux. It's actually easy to install on any of the platforms. Thank goodness. It's not difficult at all. And I do really recommend Anaconda if you're going to be learning Python. I know there's plenty of ways to do it, and I know there's tons of different ways people like to have you do it. Everybody's kind of got an opinion on that one. I've found that for my classes, Anaconda works really, really, really well. There's a little bit of a learning curve when you're first starting, but it works awesome. So anyway, you just download it. It's not a gigantic download. Just remember, it's 786 megabytes, so it's not small either. Hard to believe I'm saying 786 megabytes is not a gigantic download, but I've been downloaded a lot of stable diffusion checkpoints that are like 2 and 5 gigabytes. So I guess I figure 786 ain't that big no more. So once you get that downloaded, go over here and open up my downloads directory. So once you get it downloaded, it probably will be in your downloads directory. Just double click. It will take it a little bit to expand itself and get the installer ready to launch. So just give it a second and it'll get going. Depends on how fast your computer is and how fast the hard drive is, how long this takes. But you got to remember, it is unpacking, nearly 800 megabytes of stuff. So it's not a trivial thing to unpack. So yeah, I love Anaconda. I use it on my iPhone and I use it in Linux on Pop! OS and on Ubuntu. And I use it on Windows, both 10 and 11. I do not use it on a Mac, but that's only because I don't have a Mac that's strong enough right now for doing classes and things like that. One day I probably will, because I like knowing all the different systems I can within reason. But yeah, it works great on Mac. Many of my students use Mac OS and they have no problems with Anaconda at all. That's one of the reasons I really like it. It works fine for my stuff, whether it's Windows, Mac, Python on Linux. And if someone really wanted to, they could actually do the class on an iPhone if they so desired, or Android for that matter. Isn't that awesome? I think that's great. So here we are in Anaconda setup. I'm going to go ahead and minimize, close out my downloads. There's no need to have that running. So here we are. Once that opens up, just click on next. And then you've got your license agreement. I've got to tell you to read this. You're supposed to read your license agreements. Nobody ever does, but you're supposed to. So I'm telling you to. Anyway, just click I agree, or you're not going to be able to install it, obviously. I generally just tell people to install it for them. I realize that there is a school of thought that says you should do it for all users, and I understand that school of thought. If it was just for me, who is very competent in Windows stuff and has taught Windows administration for many, many years, you know what? If I did it for all users for me, it would be fine. Super easy, no biggie. However, if you're at work, if you're one of my students that doesn't have a lot of experience with the Windows operating system or programming in this case, you know what? Just Me is simple. It puts it in a directory in your files, so you don't need to have admin privileges or nothing. It's easy to uninstall if you ever had to uninstall it. It works fine. So I don't see a strong and compelling argument to use all users for the vast majority of my students, or even the users of this. I do tend to like having stuff installed for the specific user unless absolutely necessary. I'm not going to log in as any other user that I can think of on this relative to Python. I might do it for SQL. For teaching SQL, I might log in under different usernames, but certainly not for Python. I can't imagine it. So I'm just going to say just me. In most cases, that's fine. So click next. Don't change your destination folder unless you absolutely have to. Let it go ahead and put its destination where it wants to. Now, one really important caveat, okay? Do not put spaces into that folder name, okay? So let me show you real quick. I realize many of you were like, oh, come on, you don't really need to show us that. Just bear with me. Let me show you real quick. So if I make myself a new folder here, right? Obviously, I can have spaces in that folder. So let's say for argument's sake, I go in here and I decide to rename this. This is my Anaconda. Don't want none. We'll leave it at that. Don't be doing this. And the reason why is there has been more than a few times where Anaconda's install has broken.
You lie!
Because it was placed into a folder that had spaces in it. And it wasn't Anaconda itself that broke, but it was the dependencies. It was some module library that we were loading into Python or Anaconda, one or the other, both. And anyway, bottom line was the person that wrote that did not properly deal with spaces and paths. And so it wasn't Anaconda's fault that it began to self-destruct, but it did. And I've been using Anaconda now for a pretty good number of years, not a super long time, but reasonable long time. And I've had it happen not 2 times, but 3 times over the years where I've done an update or even just a fresh install and it just self-destructs being placed into something with spaces. So please don't do that. Let it just do its thing. That's perfectly fine. So it's in my users directory, and the name Anaconda 3 is perfectly fine. There's no need to change that unless you absolutely need to. So we're good. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Everything here is fine. Don't mess with it. I have kind of mixed feelings. I would never add it to my path. Let's put it that way. This is kind of self-explanatory. Do you want it to make shortcuts? Fine. Just make shortcuts is fine. Add Anaconda to my path. I never would do that. I can't imagine any reason to do that. Anaconda will be able to figure out what Python to use, even if you don't do this. And on some operating systems, adding Anaconda to your path might actually break stuff. So it's generally recommended to never select this option. It's almost never needed anyway. Registering it as your default Python 3.1 or 3.10, I'll leave that one to you. I know a lot of people say you should clear that. I'm going to go ahead and leave it registered as my default. In this install on a virtual machine, it probably will not be an issue. The reason why I say probably is because if I ever do install Python standalone, like if I go download it, here, let me show you real quick. A picture's worth 1,000 words. If I go over here to the Python website, right, and I go download the current version of Python. So here's the current version of Python. It's conceivable that that might harm something if I had this installed. It is unlikely. I've done it, and it never seems to have any issues. But I have heard of people that use Visual Studio Code as an example, having issues with that. So on this one, if you're at work or you're using Visual Studio Code or PyCharm or IDEs, integrated development environments, you might want to ask before you install Anaconda and make sure that that they've tested it, or test it in a virtual machine real quick. Python doesn't take very long to install. So maybe build up a virtual machine real fast and do some tests and see if it breaks it. I'm not going to change it because I've never had a problem with it. I've always been able, if I had to override it anyway. And on Windows, since it doesn't come with Python stock yet, it's not a big deal. On Mac OS and on Python or on Linux, could be an issue. So I'll leave it to you. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and register it. That's fine. And then I just go ahead and clear the package cache. There's no sense in taking up space when you don't need it. So I don't mind recovering some disk space. It's not like I need to, but I'm going to anyway. We'll go ahead and click install. That's it. Anaconda is pretty easy to install. The biggest thing is there's a couple gotchas there that you could run into. Obviously, there's options there you may not know what to do if you're a beginner. But other than that, I've had it fail. I don't know how many times I've installed the Anaconda product. I've probably installed it. It's got to be over 70 times over the years on virtual machines and for different classes and for customers. And I mean, it's got to be a lot of times, 70 to 100 times. And I think I've only ever seen it blow up the install a couple times, which is pretty good. And once was on Linux, it basically self-destructed under Ubuntu. And I chalk that up to probably a bad hard drive or some kind of bad driver or something, because I basically redid the virtual machine and it worked fine. So it was probably something in the virtual machine got corrupted. And I have had it blow up a couple of times in Windows 10 where it just decided, you know what? I'm going to explode today. But in general, Anaconda, I've used it for classes now for going on 4 or 5 years. I think. I'm pretty sure I've used the notebook system, the Jupyter Notebooks, for 4 or 5 years. And I don't know if I've ever installed Jupyter Notebooks manually, standalone. I think I've always used Anaconda for that. Don't quote me because it's been a while that I've been teaching Python. I'm pretty sure that's true. So yeah, should be great. I'm going to go ahead and snip through the rest of this so you don't have to wait. I'll be quiet here for a little bit. Okay, looks like it has completed. So we click next. I'll leave it to you if you want to go to their website or whatever, just click next. We don't need to do either of these. Go ahead, I just cleared them. If you want to read them, fine, no worries. If you haven't used Anaconda before, it might not be a bad idea to hit these, but for what we're doing, we're going to walk it ourselves. So I'm going to clear them and click finish. So it's like, where is it? Did it really install? Yeah, it really installed. Let's go over here. And we click on our little Windows icon here, whether it's in Windows 10 or Windows 11, either one's fine. Or you can hit the Windows key, either if you have a Windows key, click on that. And you should see in Windows 11, it should be smart enough to see that you have Anaconda Navigator installed recently, and it's supposed to put things like that under recommended. If it didn't, you can just go into search up here and type in Anaconda. And the Navigator should be the thing that pops up at the top. If it isn't, it'll be in the list of apps here, okay? So, but normally Navigator is the one that comes up at the top. Just click on that. And you know me, I like to, if you've seen my videos before, I like to always, when I do an install video, I like to test to make sure it's working first. Never trust that it's working. Always double check. Because like I said, I have run into issues in the past where you go to install something and it says it completed successfully and nope, no, that was wishful thinking. And there we are. So this is your Anaconda Navigator screen. This is basically just a place where you can, for lack of better, launch your products that have been downloaded. I usually use Jupyter Notebook in class. I may one day switch to Jupyter Lab up here because Jupyter Lab is technically the replacement for Jupyter Notebook. But companies really like Jupyter Notebook, so they stuck with it. So let's go ahead and run Jupyter Notebook. Just click Launch. So click Launch on Jupyter Notebook. And that'll start up its web server because Jupyter Notebook is a web-based technology. So it's going to start a web server for you. And it should also open up your default browser or the browser that's being used for it. And it will actually open up a navigation window, basically a web page where you can get at stuff. It sometimes takes, I've noticed on Windows 11, sometimes it takes a little bit to get started. It's actually interesting how much faster Jupyter Notebook responds on, say, Pop! OS, a Linux distribution, than it does on Windows 11. I don't know what Windows 11 is doing in the background, but it is significantly snappier on Pop! OS than it is. But I know that most people don't run Linux. So here we are. This is your Jupyter Notebook screen. Let's go, and we're not going to do anything fancy here. Let's, just for giggles, why don't we make a folder to hold our notebooks just so we have a separate place to do that? So we'll click on New and Folder. And you'll see down here where it says Untitled Folder. Select that with the little checkbox. See that? So that's what happens when you did New Folder, makes an untitled folder, and then you click on this and then click Rename, and we'll just call it Notebooks. Make it simple. But may as well show you this. I don't want you to get in the habit of just dumping notebooks into your root home directory, because that's what this is. This is basically your home directory here, your what's called the home path. Here, I'll show you. If I go on to Windows here and I type in # home path, that's where I'm at, basically. See the notebooks directory I just made? So I don't want you to get in the habit of dumping notebooks into your home path. You want to make a folder to place those in. So we'll go ahead and click on Notebooks and open it. We'll double click it and open it. And you'll see it's empty. It has no notebooks currently. Ah, look, New Python 3 notebook. Looks good. So let's click on that. And we won't do anything fancy schmancy, but let's just check our version of Python and then we'll be done. So I'm going to kick the font size up on this. I'm going to do a quick rename. To rename the notebook, just click on where it says Untitled up here. See how my mouse wiggling? Click on that and then enter a new name. I'm just going to put this Python tests. And I like to test things using something really simple. However, I am testing with Jupyter Notebook because I want to ensure that works. I don't want to just test at the command line. Most of the people that are going to be watching this video are my students, probably that are either they're going to use my Python classes in real world, or they're going to be using my Python tutorials on YouTube and stuff that I'm going to be posting. So Jupyter is going to be a key technology with that. So I want to test Jupyter to make sure it works. So let's test our version. That's pretty easy. We do an exclamation point and type Python space hyphen capital V, not lowercase v, capital V. So exclamation point, bang, Python hyphen V, Control Enter. And you should see Python 3.1.9. Looks like it worked to me. And for extra bonus points, just for fun, if you want to play along, if you're following along on this, make sure your cursor's blinking right there. You know, make sure your cursor's blinking in this cell. Click Edit for me, or not Edit, Insert for me, and click Insert Cell Below right there. Click on that. And then down here, get your cursor in here. See it blinking in that cell? So do this for me. Type in Import Platform. And then right below that, what I need you to do is do print, and then in parentheses, type platform. Or yeah, platform, Python _ version. So notice the dot, notice the underscore, and then Control Enter again once, and make sure your parentheses are correct here at the end. So hit Control Enter, and you should see 3.1.9. The reason I'm doing that is that lets me verify two very specific things. You don't have to write this down, but I'll write it down for you. This tests the ability to run command line. Sorry, my brain. Ability to run command line stuff. And this down here, the ability to import modules and print functionality. So I'm testing two specific things there because unbelievably, you could be able to run command line stuff, yet at the same time not be able to import things. Unlikely you could run command line and have the import still work, but you never know. But I'm just checking both. So yeah, looks like it worked. We're good. We're done. Success. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and close these windows. I don't really care if we save it. You can if you want to, but it doesn't matter. That's just a test. If you want to save it, you can save it. I'm going to go ahead and close Navigator. As you can see here, it asks you, are you sure you want to close this? We'll say quit. Do you really want to close? Yes. And that should close down the notebook server and all that too. So last thing, if you wish to follow along, go ahead and hit your window key again. Go ahead and press the Windows key. Remember our little Anaconda navigator that showed up? If it's in Windows 10, I think it's going to show up in the Windows menu here. It'll show up in here. But on Windows 11, it shows up here. To make it easier for you to get this, especially if you're not a real fast typist, just right-click on this thing, and it'll have an option there to pin to taskbar. I like keeping my really commonly used stuff pinned to the taskbar. So as you can see, there it is. So make sure, though, that you do that for in here. How do I put this? Don't wait until Anaconda Navigator has run to pin that icon to the taskbar. It has to run a bunch of scripts to start properly, and I've had issues with that where it self-destructs itself. It won't hurt anything, but it won't run right. So it's better to do it. Just type in Anaconda Navigator in search and then right-click, and you can pin it to the taskbar from here. That way it'll be the actual start script that starts, basically, because this is basically a script that starts it. Okay. So sweet, you're good to go. Now, assuming everything worked. And again, I always like to ask, if you enjoyed this video and it was helpful to you, I would really appreciate like, share, subscribe, the usual YouTube thing. You know how it is. If you want to hit a comment down there to help the algorithm, you and I know if you're doing the computer gig, you probably know algorithms are a big deal. So if you want to leave me a comment that it helped you or something, I would really appreciate it. And hey, I'm going to have a link to my Patreon. If you enjoy this kind of stuff and you would like to see more things like that, I would very much appreciate the support on Patreon. And I'll make sure that if you do, for now anyway, I'll make sure that you get credit at the end of the video or whatever, like a little credit for all the Patreon people. At some point, if I get enough Patreons, I probably will start doing some, for lack of better, custom content specific for my Patreon folks. Who knows? I might do a Discord chat, or I might do a live stream on YouTube with my Patreon people, or just anybody, who knows? We'll see what happens. Hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you very much. Buen dia, and we'll see you. Bye-bye.